Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. It is Monday, February 19th. That means it's time for our weekly Hoops HD report. I'm your host,
Woohoo!
Chad Sherwood. Woohooing next to me over here is David Griggs, also David Dorman up top. We've got the Davids on the top row, we
Yeah.
got the Johns on the bottom row, John Titel and John Stalika. We actually have a lot to get to tonight. We both with on-court news and brackets and Sweet 16 reveals. So we're going to try to go a little quicker pace than normal tonight if we can, but who knows? Um,
We will fail. We will fail. We will be
we,
here for 3.5 hours.
before we get to that, though, there was some sad news. Off the court, the passing of one of the great head coaches of all time, Lefty Driesell, this past week. He was the head coach at began at Davidson, I believe, then longtime coach at Maryland, also James Madison at Georgia State. But he was the guy that was going to make Maryland the UCLA of the East. And I guess if we look at 2024 numbers, Maryland and UCLA probably are about the same, right? But um, uh,
Succeeded.
success.
Chad will be here all week, everybody.
But Tytel, you actually had a chance to meet to interview him a few years back. So your thoughts on him on the great Maryland coach?
Yes, in 2018, he was named to the Naismith Hall of Fame, and every year I reach out to all the Hall of Fame inductees to see if they'd be willing to talk to little old me, and Lefty was kind enough to say yes. His story is pretty amazing. I mean, just on the court, he started Midnight Madness at Maryland in '71. He won the NIT in '72. He lost in overtime to NC State in the '74 ACC tourney title game, which is still considered one of the greatest games in the history of the sport. He was the first coach to win over 100 games at 4 different schools. But most importantly, in my mind, off the court, in '74, he won the NCAA Award of Valor for breaking down the door of a burning building at a Delaware resort and saving the lives of at least 10 children. Like, it's an amazing life and story and career. And I'm sad to hear that we've lost him, but he lived well both on and off the court.
Yeah, one of the great figures in the history of college basketball, truly, and we are saddened to miss him, and our thoughts and condolences to all his friends and family out there. Uh, let's kind of turn our attention to a few things here, and I guess I'm going to pull the screen share up a little bit early today and go to something a little different than our normal workbook. I'm going to go right to our Hoops HD website here. We have a new feature. Well, a few weeks ago, we debuted our team sheets on the website. If you look right up there, you now have to look at the team sheets to go to click on it. It actually says team sheets and DEF CON ratings. This is a new formula that unfortunately Joby Forts is not with us tonight. It was his he masterminded this. He came up with the actual math calculations, which I don't even understand. I got involved more with the formatting and getting up on the website end of things, as well as some of the getting some of the raw data for him. But Griggs, these are what's called DEF CON ratings, which is it's war games, right?
That's how I understood it. Yes. In a nutshell, it can obviously when your team is playing, you know that it's important that they win or lose. But this is basically, if I understand it in layman's terms and the simplest way of explaining it, it's that it lets you know what other games are important to you, to a specific team. Is that right?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
If you see here on the top of the sheet here, it actually this blue section here gives it all kinds of some of the factors that go into this. You can read through that. I'm not going to go through all of that here, but let's say you are a fan of, uh, as we record this right now, Kansas State is playing. So you're a Kansas State fan, and you
Yeah.
want to know not only do I have to win or lose, which is the most important thing always, but what
You
other
always have to
games,
win.
what other games might impact my team's ability to either get into the NCAA tournament or may improve our seed line should we make it into the NCAA tournament. So if you went and you clicked on Kansas State, it'll pull up their team sheet along with their DEF CON ratings. Now, it does take a moment for the team sheets to load. But Griggs, if you go down to that podcast on that team sheet page that you and I recorded, there is a trick there, but you have to watch
Yeah.
that podcast
You have to
to
watch
figure it
that
out.
podcast. Yeah.
Go to the K-State Web's team sheet here. You scroll down a bit, and you have Kansas State DEF CON game ratings for Monday, February 19th, 2024. That's today. Only 3 games that come up with DEF CON ratings. Obviously, they are playing. That's DEF CON 1. DEF CON 1. The most important thing is you win your own game.
Yeah.
But there's 2 other games that came up here on today's schedule that could help them. Virginia beating Virginia Tech, which did not happen, could help them.
Oh,
Iowa State
boy.
beating Houston, which is going on right now, also could help them either A, get into the tournament, or B, at least improve their seed line. And the math goes how many times you played teams. There's all kinds of calculations. I'll pull one more up here. You scroll down the right here. Let's go all the way down to that Virginia team that played today. Uh,
Oh boy.
was not a good day for
played
Virginia.
played is a very generous word to use for what they did today. We'll get to that when we get
Here's
to
a
the
team with a few more games. So they've got from DEFCON 1 to DEFCON 5. Not as many games today, is a slow day, so we don't have as many, but also Kansas State winning would help Virginia. Morgan State beating Delaware State. I believe Virginia played Morgan State and beat them, so Morgan State getting better could help Virginia's profile, but it's DEFCON 5 very,
Yeah.
very mildly. So it kind of lets you know not only who to your own team to pull for, but what other teams you should pull for and how they could that may be able to impact your seeding or your selection to the bracket. Did I get that?
I think you did. That's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, props to you and Joby for coming up with that. All kidding aside, that is a great feature, and it is kind of fun. I mean, it's going to make my write-ups obsolete. You can just go to the team sheets and see what games are important.
Oh, good. That was one of our main goals in this.
Yeah, I mean,
we're
trying
trying
to
to make
rid of
you
it.
completely obsolete is our whole goal.
Yeah.
Well, I just assumed it was an AI chatbot in the morning anyhow.
Well, no, that's artificial. There's nothing intelligent about what I post in the mornings.
Okay, let's jump over. I'm going to pull our workbook up here. And the other big event from this past weekend was the NCAA's reveal of the top 16 seeds. Like I said, we've got a lot of other things to get to here. And Tytel, you are our bracketology expert here on the show tonight. What did you think about the NCAA's top 16 seed reveal, which I've got on the screen right there?
I'm happy to report that my top four were Purdue, UConn, Houston, Arizona. So I'm glad to hear that I'm on the right page and not losing my mind. I don't think there were any shockers. Certainly, some teams in this group are fading fast. I'm looking at you, Wisconsin. But I think that the committee did a very good job. Does anybody think otherwise?
I think that, I was going to say Dorman. I thought one of probably the biggest surprise was San Diego State making that top 16.
Yeah, I think it was probably tied between them and Creighton. As Tytel said, Wisconsin happened to lose a few hours later to Iowa in Iowa after this came out. So that result wasn't in yet. But I would have had Creighton there over San Diego State for that last 4 seed. But my top 3 lines were almost exactly like that, almost in that exact order. I think they did a pretty good job. Yeah.
I got to agree. I've disagreed with them a lot on these top 16s, of course, in the past. This is one of the few times I really thought they got it spot on. There's arguments for Creighton, for Clemson, or for Dayton instead of maybe San Diego State or Wisconsin, but they were.
Did you find it odd that, well, one of the things I kind of wanted to point out is that, what Tytel does, he tries to guess the real committee. What our mock committee does is nothing of the sort. We're our own committee. It's our own thing. And without even trying, we pretty much, it was it 15 out of the 16 and 12 seated correctly, and the top 6 were ordered correctly. And we weren't even trying. That we were just on, going off of our own druthers. And
you're talking about what we did Thursday night in our
what we did Thursday
show, by the way.
The Thursday
for
night
people that have
show.
no idea what Griggs is talking about, let's explain things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I really like this a lot. I liked what the committee did.
Yeah.
We've got another, though. If you want to see more than just the top 16 teams, Tytel, this is your most recent bracket from just yesterday, in fact, all 68 teams. We did this last week. I wanted to pull it up again this week. And I know Griggs had a couple of questions for you about, this is your full bracket, again, not just the top 16.
Yeah. And
Griggs?
yeah. And I like the disclaimer there at the bottom. All bracketing errors are due solely to Griggs' incompetency. Thank you for including that to make sure there's no question. Well, I guess my first question, John, is you still had Wisconsin up here as a protected seed even after the loss at Iowa, and they've lost 5 of their last 6, 4 of those to teams that don't appear to be in the field. Why do you still feel that they would be a protected seed?
So I'm going to answer that by focusing on both the good and the bad. So let's focus on the good, which answers the question, why should they be? Neutral site wins over Virginia and SMU. The home wins over Marquette, Nebraska, and Northwestern. A sweep of Michigan State and Ohio State. Obviously, the Buckeye sweep is looking a lot better today than it did last week. Still have tier 1 chances next month with Illinois and Purdue. The non-conference strength of schedule is good. The total strength of schedule is fantastic. All good, 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 good. The bad part in terms of losing 5 of their past 6, it's bad. You can't sugarcoat it. However, 4 of the 5 losses were on the road. The 5th was to a little team called Purdue at home by only 6 points. And super sub John Blackwell, as Chad knows, did not play in the loss at Rutgers. So there's a lot of bad and a lot of good. I think right now it balances out to 4. If you want to drop into a 5 and if Creighton is the last 4, that's fine too. But I think you have to look at the good and the bad, and there's a lot of both.
I will take one quick issue here. I know you got to put the asterisk by Wisconsin for missing their sixth man in the Rutgers loss. Rutgers was missing one of its starters, Mawat Mag, for the entire game against Wisconsin as well. So I think that asterisk kind of disappears, does it not?
It certainly is a smaller asterisk, Chad.
Okay. Let me throw one out here. Titel, there are 6 Big 12 teams that are in there's more than 6 in your field actually, but 6 of them: Iowa State, TCU, Texas Tech, UCF. Well, UCF's not in your field, but there are 6 Big 12 teams out there actually that have out of conference strength of schedules in the 300s, several of which did make your field. And there's 2 more, BYU and Oklahoma, that their strength of schedules are in the 280s. Again, non-conference, not overall. Do you think that that's going to end up hurting those teams maybe a little bit more than people are expecting?
I don't, and let me explain why. So, most of them, as you probably have guessed, are in the field because they picked up enough good wins in conference play to outweigh any of these strength of schedule problems. If you take a look specifically at like Cincinnati's bubblicious profile, their best non-conference win was Eastern Washington, who's a good team, but their best. I think what's going to hurt them the most, though, is the loss at West Virginia last month, because each of their other 8 losses are to teams well inside the bubble. And then Xavier, of course, as Talika knows. So as I mentioned last week, a team like Oklahoma still has lots of chances to move up. The bad news, they did not get off to a good start with double-digit losses last week to Baylor and Kansas.
All right. One more question, Griggs, then we'll move on.
Yeah, and I know we're going to talk a fair amount about this team, but one of the big stories is South Florida. It's sort of an anomaly. It's just a little bit of an unusual case to where I think everybody would either say that they are the best team on the court between the lines in the American right now, but when you look at their overall body of work, it still doesn't get up to where Florida Atlantic is. And they're out of conference strength of schedule, and not just that, but their schedule within the conference, they don't play FAU and Memphis twice. Can this team reach the bubble and get inside of it, or do they need the automatic bid?
I'm leaning the latter, need auto bid, but obviously winning 17 your past 18 certainly helps. Neutral site over Florida State, on the road at Memphis, home against FAU, all good stuff. Still have a home game against SMU, still have a road trip to Charlotte. As you see, the non-conference strength of schedule, atrocious. The home losses to Central Michigan and Maine, also atrocious. It's a very weird resume. They flipped the switch in early December, which is why they won 17 of 18. But it's very hard to explain the 2-4 start. Their only real injury, Brandon Stroud missed the loss at Hofstra, but like, I can't explain it. They sucked in November.
They did.
What if one more loss, Title, comes to that exact FAU team in the finals, or could even be in the semis? What if one more loss on the season, and if it's FAU?
Still think that's too many strikes against them. I mean, Chad, I don't know if you have it memorized. I assume not, but like, I assume there's not too many teams in the field with a pair of tier 4 losses, correct?
Was it pair of tier 4 losses? No, but we do see a few. There's a handful of teams with the single tier 4 loss, such as the Mississippi States and the Northwesterns out there. So I agree with you. I think it's fascinating. It's Talika. Why don't we just go right into a little bit more about the American, because I think you had some thoughts on the South Florida team as well.
Titel says they flipped the switch back in December. I would argue actually January 18 at Memphis, 2 switches got flipped on that day. That is about when Memphis had a 20-point lead against the Bulls. They blew said lead, and both teams have gone in completely different directions. South Florida has won 11 straight. Memphis has completely fallen off the face of the earth since then and have never been heard from again. Now, if you look at yesterday's game where South Florida was playing FAU, they were blowing them off of the face of the earth by 25 points. Had that lead with about 8 minutes to go. Now, to Florida Atlantic's credit, they damn near came back in that one, but they got it down to as little as 1 point, but were unable to completely overcome that deficit. And now the Bulls are going to be 2 games ahead of Florida Atlantic in the conference standings, and things are looking more and more like you could see USF as the #1 seed in the American. They've already tied a school record for conference wins. They're going to shatter that record by a lot this year at this rate.
Rocco Miller could not be with us tonight. He was actually at that game, I believe, the South Florida FAU game. I don't know why I said that because it has nothing to do with the point I'm going to make. But Rocco Miller was there, but he pointed out something that is kind of important here, and that's that the American, presumably in an attempt to strengthen overall tournament resumes of the teams that they felt had the best chance of getting there, tried to schedule the top half to where their home and homes were against each other. So you look at North Texas, you look at FAU for sure, you look at Memphis, they all played each other twice. South Florida was not projected into that half. So if you look at their conference schedule, they're playing the best teams once. And while that helps their overall record, it arguably, well, maybe not even arguably, hurts their overall tournament profile. And the committee is going to look at that and say, well, yeah, they're the first place team, but they had an easy strength of schedule within the conference.
Yeah, and I hope they don't go back to this model again next year because it clearly backfired on them. I think. Um, Real quick, one other team here. Titel, now you had a few thoughts on UAB, and then we can move on to some other conferences.
So Chad gets the props for this fun fact. The Blazers have been playing ball since the 70s. Most wins by any of their coaches in a 4-year stretch. 94, Gene Bartow from 83 to 87. Got to give some props to Coach Andy Kennedy, now at 95 wins and counting after the 9-point victory over North Texas last Sunday. UAB started 4-5 this year, but have won 13 of 16, only 3 road losses to some of the best teams in the league. FAU, Charlotte, SMU. Future looks very bright. Javian Davis, the only senior among the top 12 scorers on the roster, and they still got a lot of work to do in the weeks ahead. But if they can meet SMU at home in the regular season finale, then they probably get a rematch with SMU in the quarterfinals. And they already beat South Florida last month, so I can see a path for them to get to the title game.
Not only that, they're actually tied with FAU as well in the loss column, and we could be, by tiebreakers. I guess there's a chance that FAU could finish in 5th place. I don't know all those tiebreakers, but Dorman, the upcoming schedule this week, we got to concentrate on 2 teams here: Florida Atlantic and South Florida. FAU has the home games against SMU, and then the first game with Memphis. I believe they've got to play them twice at Memphis, while South Florida hosts SMU and is at San Antonio.
Well, like Titel just said, every game here on out for South Florida for the Bulls is a must win. So it's going to be great down the stretch for South Florida if they can keep stockpiling these wins. And like you said, Florida Atlantic is holding on for dear life here, and they also really can't afford any losses, but they're going to start crushing their seed and starting to get closer to the bubble if this continues.
If you want to know what games
Sunday's
will affect their
crowd,
seed, go to the DEF CON ratings. Go ahead, Sleek us
I was going to say, Sunday's crowd was their first sellout in 23 years at the Sun Dome / the Youngling Center. I don't think they will have to wait this long again for another sellout.
I think they're going to sell out all their remaining home games. I mean, people are really getting behind this team. It's actually kind of incredible because they've got no real history to speak of, minus the Stan Heath years. And in case you're wondering, I do know this bit of trivia. I know a lot of people that guess the brackets could see South Florida, who's getting close to the rankings. Well, if they finish first and they're in the top 25, the committee will take them. There have been cases where that did not happen. I can think of 2. Albeit one was a long time ago when Utah State won the Big West and was ranked in the 20s. And very sort of recently when Murray State was the first place team and got into the 20s. Out of the OVC and didn't get selected. So not necessarily.
I believe it also happened. It will go way back now. One of the years that Rolly Massimito was at UNLV, I believe he had a team in the top 25 that also did not get selected.
Yeah, and
That
were
goes
they the
way
first
back, though.
place team?
I
They
don't.
would have been, I would imagine.
I'm
I
not
think
certain
they're
if they
the
were the first place team or not, though. That I'd have to check
yeah.
on. That was a pretty good. I guess I think that was Big West days still for Vegas, but
Yeah, so I would imagine they were.
uh, got a bunch more conferences to go to here. Let's try to roll through a little quicker here because we spent a lot of time on some other things at the start of the show. Let's start in the Pac-12 though. Dorman, you are an Arizona guy, and you saw your Arizona team uh, take it to their rivals on Saturday, to say the least.
Yes, they dismantled the Sun Devils. Omar Ballo down low played like he was on a mission. He was just unstoppable. I just love the overall, the way they moved the ball. They pushed the ball. The defense seemed to be focused, which hasn't always been the case in the last 3-4 weeks. But hopefully, this is a turning point right now. Arizona ready to hopefully explode. But this conference is really not going out like their football Pac-12 conference. The basketball is really in trouble here. Washington State safely in my bracket today. They've done an incredible job the last 6-8 weeks. They're red hot, playing good ball, but the rest of the conference is really struggling. The only other team really in the mix, and it's close. Some people have them in, some people have them out. Utah is right on the cut line. Otherwise, it's really a down year in the Pac-12.
Yeah, Utah pulling that game out at the last minute last night at UCLA. I think absolutely saved their season for the time being, at least.
Yeah.
That was a heck of a finish at a game that they probably should have lost. But Stalika, how about some congratulations to those Washington State Cougars for the first time since 2008 in the top 25 polls this week.
First time in 16 years, and the first time since Tony Bennett was actually coaching at Wazoo. And I also had to look this up. This was actually, I think, the season before Clay Thompson, future Splash brother, had actually played for the Cougars right here.
Yeah, but that is a standard. Dorman, I think you're right. I think we're looking at three teams here. There may still be a bit of an argument out there for Colorado, but they've really got to turn things on um, at this point.
I think we're closer to 2 than 4.
Yeah, I think you're right. Big game Saturday is Utah at Colorado, but the bigger game Thursday night, Mr. Titel, are you going? Washington State at Arizona.
I'm not. I'm in the Grand Canyon State as we speak, but flying back to DC tomorrow, and thought about going down to Tucson and regret that I didn't because it was such a shellacking. I'll save that full story for my final thought. But the Cougs are the great story, and they have a legit shot at winning the conference, which I didn't think was possible even a month ago.
No one's thought this been possible for over 10 years now, I don't think. Let's keep things rolling right along here. Let's jump over to the Big Ten Conference. And Greg, at the top of the show, we did a little bit of discussion about that Wisconsin team already. But I think the other big story was Purdue going to Ohio State, who had just fired Chris Holtmann, had the interim coach in place here, and losing.
Yeah, it was stunning, really. How important was it? I don't think it knocks Purdue off the one line, nor do I think it gets Ohio State within 100 miles of the bubble. But it was just a shocking result. I mean, not only did Purdue look as good as anyone other than maybe Connecticut by quite a bit, really. I mean, I think that there's kind of a gap between the second and third team on the seed list, but Ohio State could not have possibly been in more disarray. Sometimes when you go through an experience like that, I mean, this burden can be removed, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but that's one of the biggest surprises of the year, at least for me. The result of it, I just could not believe it.
Meanwhile, Dorman, it was another nice week for Michigan State. Sparty is I think what was hanging around the bubble for a while. This team is definitely on the rise, though, in my opinion, at least.
Absolutely. They moved up my bracket significantly this week, and they're starting to pile up wins. They have a big game next week, not this week. They're going to Purdue. That would really make this resume stand out and get their seed. They could be, looking at 6-5s if they could pull that off. And then they get Northwestern at home. Those are the two big ones on the schedule left for Sparty. But I agree with you, Chad. They're playing good ball. I think they're safely in the field right now. And everyone in Michigan State says January, February, and then Izzo.
Sleek, what about Nebraska? Are they playing good ball right now? Is this team with only one win, with one road win, as Griggs would point out, a tournament team at the moment, in your opinion?
They were probably fortunate they were at least playing at home, getting the wins against Michigan and Penn State recently. Of course, that's being counterbalanced by losses at Northwestern and at Illinois of late. They may also have to go to Indiana like Northwestern did just to at least get some kind of road win and check it off their resume. And as we've seen, Ohio State and Michigan, not quite a sure thing. So the Huskers better start checking off one of those boxes pretty quickly, because as we're getting into mid to late February, a lack of road wins, as much as I hate agreeing with the puppet, it's going to start taking its toll on the Huskers.
If you all would agree with me more often, you'd be all right a lot more.
Uh, Title, I want to pull two pair profiles up on the screen here, and because I've heard some talk here about both of them. Left, I'm going to pull up Minnesota. The right, I'm going to pull up Rutgers. Do you think either one of these teams is within sniffing distance of the bubble, or is it just, some of the media wanting to get an extra Big Ten team into play?
The latter, but continuing on that train of thought, the puppet said that Ohio State's not within 100 miles. Like, you beat Purdue and Alabama, you're within 100 miles, right?
I'll pull up Ohio State here. And you know what, Griggs? I don't think it's that much worse of a profile than Minnesota or Rutgers has.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is. They're 0-7 on the road.
They got 3 road games left. They win all 3 of them.
Then maybe they'll be within 5 miles
How's
of it.
Nebraska
But right
on the
now
road,
they're
Chad?
about
How's Nebraska on the road, Chad?
Bad.
One win. They won a K-State, which is a bubble team too, so it's not that bad.
How about the top 2 tiers at least?
Mhm.
Look at the
No,
Buckeyes again.
I don't think. Well, what do you think? I mean, you're better at guessing this than I am, but I don't. If Nebraska does not win 2 more road games, I don't think they get selected. I don't think they should get selected. If you can't win at Indiana, you're not in a tournament team.
Ordinarily, but I'm telling you, like, this is one of those years. I don't know, I forget the stat, but like, it's a record number of top 10 teams, not that Nebraska is, who've lost to unranked teams on the road, because it's a phenomenon. I don't know if it's because of the portal or grad transfers or COVID years or what, but like, it's an epidemic and it's happening.
Yeah, I've heard that too, John. I normally the overall home record I think is 73%, and it's normally 71, which is higher. It sounds like it's not, but it is. But that is quite a few more home wins. But is it that much higher to where like you still just? I just don't see the committee looking at Nebraska and saying, "Oh, we're going to take them if they don't win at least 2 more road games."
Well, I'll tell you what, this is the upcoming schedule for this week, and these are maybe the 2 of the most interesting games on the schedule. Is Nebraska's 2 games this week at Indiana, where, like I said, they need a road win, and the home game against a Minnesota team that some people think are on the bubble. We may not, but other than that, and Rutgers at Purdue on Thursday. Only reason I bring that up is because we all know the truth about the state of Indiana.
Ohio State, Minnesota.
Ohio State, Minnesota, 2 teams
Thursday.
that
One we just discussed.
well, we can definitely throw the loser out of the discussion, and I think we should throw the winner out as well. But we'll see.
Now, before we move on, I would like to bring a historical footnote as it relates to Jake Diebler. This is the first time in 37 years we've had a coach make his debut by getting a win against the number 2 ranked team in the country. Last time that happened was back in the 86-87 season when Carl Fogel made his debut at Northeastern, beating Louisville in their season opener. And if that name sounds familiar, and it probably doesn't, he succeeded Jim Calhoun as the head coach of the Huskies.
John, are you sure you're right about that? How could Louisville be ranked 2nd ever?
This was in the Iron Age.
All right, we're moving on to the Big 12, where as we record, there's a pair of pretty big games going on. And Houston has a very early lead over Iowa State, and I'm trying to get the other score here. Right, Texas is leading K-State early as well, but
20-16. Yeah,
20-16. There we go. Griggs, let me start with you. You were extremely excited about Houston, Texas on Saturday. I think I watched about 1 minute of the game before it got ugly.
Yeah, Houston just boat raced them. It was in Houston makes other teams look bad. Iowa State a pretty good offensive team, but not tonight. Defensively, their schematics and just their toughness are off the charts. I don't think they've looked as quite as good as UConn, and maybe not Purdue, although Purdue's coming up. But this is Houston is a Final Four caliber team, and I don't think any of you really disagree with that. We've been putting them on the one line for months now. So it's not surprising that they beat Texas rather handily on their own floor,
The other
and
team
that
that
they're
had
going to probably blow out Iowa State tonight, as good as Iowa State is.
the other team that had a real good win this weekend, Dorman, was actually Kansas, who had been struggling so much on the road, and they went to a pretty good Oklahoma team and won by 10 points on the road this weekend.
Yeah, and they were losing like the end of the first half and early second half, by like 7, 8 points, and they just turned it on. Defense really stepped up, got a bunch of stops in a row, and they looked. I agree with you. They looked as good as they have in, I think, a month or two. That was the best they've looked to me in a while, and we'll see if they're about to turn it on and make a push. See if they're going to make a run to the Final Four or get themselves in the Big 12 championship, because this conference tournament is going to be bananas. These teams, I mean, we got Texas sitting on the 10th seed in the Big 12. Right now, they'd be playing like a 7 seed BYU in the first round in a game. Both teams, BYU won't need it, but Texas might need that game really bad. And that's going to be a crazy tournament.
I want to speak about this BYU team for a second here. They had a week where they almost lost at home to Central Florida and then lost to a pretty bad Oklahoma State team. Stalika, I've been saying all season that when I watch this BYU team play, they just don't look very good to me. And I think they proved me right this week.
What's that famous quote from Chad Sherwood that good teams manage to win close games even if it's against Central Florida? Good teams win them.
Yeah.
But at least if they're getting blown out at Oklahoma State, it's not a close game.
I don't know. Titel, do you think this is a good team?
They're 10th in the net and like
Yeah.
7th in the conference. It says more to the conference. And going back to the original bracket question, they have a bad non-conference strength of schedule and plenty of losses. But look at all those losses, mostly to great teams, not just good teams, great teams, and many of them by single digits. And a lot of them on the road, because it's hard to win on the road, as everybody knows. Plenty of chances left. I don't think they're going to win a lot of them because they're very tough games, many of them on the road. I believe in BYU, not to like make the Final Four, but they are legit good. So as long as they don't have to play on Sunday, I think they're a really good threat.
Oh, they have to host Baylor and go to K-State this week. K-State desperate for wins if they have any shot here. But Dorman, there's a huge game coming up Saturday, I think, again involving Houston. This time they're going to have to go to Baylor.
It's like every game Houston plays is like highlight. It's incredible. Last week versus Texas, tonight Iowa State, Baylor. It'll be a tremendous game, a tremendous setting in Baylor in their brand new building that looks gorgeous. Let's see what Baylor's made of. This is games at home. This is a game they could win. They should definitely be in. I would not look for them to get blown out on their home floor, excuse me. I would actually look for Baylor to actually maybe upset Houston. Houston coming off a couple of huge games, a couple of huge wins, maybe a little letdown. Baylor sneaks up on them.
Baylor, that game is sandwiched in between a road trip to BYU and a road trip to TCU also. So this is the schedule of this conference. And we've got to throw it out there. Unless it happens again during the conference tournament, could be our last ever Bedlam game on Saturday between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State.
Yeah, there are no plans to keep it going in any of the sports, which is sad. I do think it will come back someday. I just think that eventually both schools will say this was kind of fun. Why did we stop it for a petty reason? But it will not continue for the foreseeable future.
Over in let's go to the SEC here now, and I think maybe the place to start is with Kentucky Wildcats. Stalika, they took care of Ole Miss at home, and then they had been looking so suspect, and they go to Auburn and just crushed them by what was it, 70-59 final score?
This isn't the first time we've said this about Kentucky in the past. Sure, they had been flirting with disaster, especially on the defensive end of the floor. Now, however, they were able to take care of Ole Miss at home, and fortunately, when they were on the road in a very hostile environment at Auburn, they got ahead in that game right away, never let up, and it actually gave them a decent road win to go along with a neutral court win they've had against North Carolina back in December. And I know they've been sleepwalking for the first half of conference play. This would probably put Kentucky right around track of, let's say, a 5 seed, maybe a 4 if they continue to win out right here. Although they're going to be facing some, well, more of a desperate team in Mississippi State when they go on the road later this month. LSU, they did get an upset win at South Carolina, but I just can't see Kentucky falling there.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say, Griggs, what a horrible week for South Carolina.
God.
They went 0-2. They lost at Auburn. It's excusable to lose at Auburn, but not by 40 points. And then you
Yeah.
lose at home to LSU, which is not excusable.
Yeah, the 40 points was an inexcusable showing, but I don't think it hurt them, even though they probably played a lot worse in that game. What hurt them on paper the most, and Tytel can chime in here because he does this, was the home loss to LSU. A home loss to a team that's not anywhere near the bubble is probably worse on paper than a blowout loss to a solid protected seed. Am I right in that?
Yes, and look at that upcoming schedule. It does not let up, and they need wins in the worst way. I know they got off to a great start, and their wins are absolutely phenomenal. But at Ole Miss, at A&M, Florida, and Tennessee at home, they need to win some of these games. They cannot get ice cold right now.
Tytel, you agree with that also?
No veto, Chad.
No veto. Uh, Let me pull up one other team here, Mississippi State. They did have a good week here, but they're still sitting here. We were talking about teams without road wins with only one road win. It was at Missouri.
Which, does that even count?
No.
One argue it doesn't even count, but again, Dorman, I know you had them in the bracket. Tytel, you had them in your bracket. Tytel, this is a tournament team though, despite no road wins and a home loss to Southern, is it not?
It is, and again, like I don't want to state this for the 10th time, but the Tier 4 loss to Southern at home is bad, but it's a triple asterisk loss. They're missing like 3 starters, and they also were up 12 with 6 minutes left. They should have won. They didn't, and it's a mark against them on that wrong side of the ledger, but it is explainable.
This game coming up against LA. Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that here.
Okay, well, okay. You want to go to the upcoming schedule? Let's go jump over to the upcoming schedule.
Well,
here.
I think this
Florida-
game against LSU on Saturday is massively important. It's their most winnable remaining road game. I don't think they're going to get the other two. If they get this win, then at least they'll get a second win, which is a lot more than one. It's twice as many. Somebody check my math on that.
They've got to host rival Ole Miss, an Ole Miss team that's desperate for wins as well for their tournament chances before they even get to that game at LSU.
Yeah.
And there's a few other big ones coming up here, including starting off here Wednesday night, this Florida at Alabama game. This Florida Greece has been playing really well lately. I
Yeah,
thought,
they have.
and this as has Alabama, so that makes
As
I think
has
it's a fascinating
Alabama.
game.
Yeah, Florida's been playing well. Now, this would be Herculean to go into Tuscaloosa against an Alabama team that's also playing really well, also a likely protected seed, and get that road win. I don't think Florida's been playing that well, but holy crap, that would be a huge.
Well, but Alabama could also be looking past it a little bit because Saturday they've got to go to Kentucky.
Yeah, and God, what a game that's going to be. A&M, a big week. I'm glad you highlighted that one.
I want to bring it up here because Dorman, I actually wanted to question you about it because I pulled it up A&M, and I got to tell you, maybe I should ask Tytel this question. Is this really even a tournament team now after their 0-2 week and sitting there now with 4 quad 3 losses, which is bad?
Terrible when I was looking at this and trying to place them if I was going to select them last night this morning. I couldn't stop looking, just like you said, these losses in Tier 4, 2 of them at home. We know this Memphis team isn't good, and LSU so mediocre. At Vandy is even a bad loss. That's a team most of these SEC teams are crushing. So Yeah, this could be a problem for them. Look at the schedule coming up. Arkansas at Tennessee, South Carolina, who needs it as bad. This is a huge 3-4 game stretch coming up for the Aggies, as they will have all year, and they need to win almost all of them.
Yeah, I don't know. Tytel, I don't know that I trust them to beat Arkansas at home this week either, the way they're playing right now. That's tomorrow night's game.
I trust the five of us to beat Arkansas, but that's a separate issue. There are several single asterisk games. Obviously, there's no shame in losing at Virginia, even this year, even today, and to Houston. But they were missing a little guy named Tyrese Radford, who's one of their best players. So again, like, it's still a loss, but when you're not at full strength, the committee takes that into account.
Yeah, and unfortunately for them, that Memphis loss has dropped down. It's now a quad 3 loss. It could be a quad 4 by the end of the season, the way Memphis is playing.
But Chad, on the other side, if you go back to that quickly, sorry.
Yeah.
If you go back to their wins, the wins are just look so strong. They have a Tennessee win. Iowa State is on the 3 line in most people's bracket. Now Kentucky and Florida's wins. Like, the wins are strong, and that's why I could not take them today.
They could be a very interesting team at the end of the day.
Yep.
Let's jump over to the ACC, where Salika, why don't we start with tonight and what just happened? I know Joby can't be with us, but 75-41 Virginia loss, coming off of Virginia's loss last week at home to Pittsburgh and a win over Wake Forest that was equally disgusting on Saturday.
This was nearly historically disgusting for Virginia if you want to go back to Saturday. They shot a staggering 9.1% from the free throw line. That is 1 for 11, but shockingly enough, that is not even a record. Charleston managed to go 0 for 11 in a win back in 2008, so that is not even a historic market futility right there. So they were playing Enter Sandman at the beginning of the Virginia Tech game tonight. Totally appropriate. Virginia never woke up.
And I know this Virginia team is still probably in the field right now, but if they keep playing this way, Tytel, they've got 2 tough games, a road game at BC, a home game against Georgia Tech, who's picked up a couple scalps this season. I don't know if Virginia wins another game.
I think they will, Chad. I agree. If they don't, they're in serious, you know what. But just to go back to the Virginia Tech loss, does the committee care if the loss was by 4 or 34? Please remind me.
They might actually, because it does affect some of those net ratings and stuff. So, I
think
don't.
a little
ahead,
bit. I was just going to say a little bit. I mean, when you're evaluating wins and losses, and you're kind of peeling back. I mean, I could see that on our mock committee. It might be pointed out. Well, yeah, but they lost by 34. I mean, I don't know if it's a deciding factor, but it's kind of hard to not notice that.
With all that Virginia's been doing bad this week, Dorman, we almost forgot. By the way, it's almost a week ago now. North Carolina went to Syracuse and lost this week as well.
Yeah, this conference is a little crazy, and I think Virginia's win streak, and then you see what happens to them tonight in Virginia Tech, is more of a knock on the conference. And I'm an ACC fan. I love basketball. Who doesn't? But I just don't think the conference is that strong this year. I after the first round, if Duke and North Carolina were the only 2 left, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, I don't know the way some of this conference is playing. I don't know who else is going to make it. By the way,
Correct.
Clemson suffered a home loss to NC State this week as well, Griggs.
Yeah, that one. I mean, that sets them back because you know, I think that, well, we had them as a protected seed. That was the only difference between our mock committee and the real win. And I don't foresee us putting them there Thursday. Now, again, it isn't so crippling that it kills their season or you know, knocks them outside the bubble or anything crazy like that. But if you're talking about earning a protected seed, you need to win your home games against non-tournament teams, pretty much all of them.
I know it's not balanced schedules, but you look in the standings, they're tied with the Florida State team, who's not going to be in the field, and behind Pitt, NC State, and Wake Forest teams who are all probably on the outside looking in right now.
Right. I mean, it was just a loss that, it was a game they should have won that game, and it does change their complexion quite a bit now that they didn't, for all the reasons you just mentioned.
Duke has a pair of road games this week. They're at Miami and at Wake Forest. Meanwhile, North Carolina this week is going to be at Virginia in the big one on Saturday uh,
Yeah.
before hosting Miami on Monday night. So that probably is the game. And I gotta say, the way Virginia's been playing this season, it would not shock me if they win this game by 30 points.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Miami real quick. They were, if you go back to our preseason podcast, they were one of my picks to make the Final Four. I'm starting to think that I may have been wrong.
uh,
It's early. It's early.
Yeah.
they may be in the first four. By what I mean is the four teams that have to play the opening round game in the ACC tournament.
Yeah. God.
The Big East
Well, they
Conference.
could be the number 1 seed in the AC8.
Yeah.
Sleek, the Big East Conference is your conference, and I know you do not want to discuss your Xavier Musketeers this week, but how about the rest of the league, which included another real nice showing by UConn, especially that home win over Marquette.
I'm starting to think UConn was actually watching the top 16 that was released on Saturday afternoon. That was around 12:30 Eastern. It was right before the 1 p.m. tip and a couple hours before they went to Marquette. And boy, the Huskies were in a bad mood for that one. And I swear I was not at that game, but it was another blowout in the Excel Center.
Good Lord. That might be the most impressive showing of the year. I know it was at home, but oh my Lord, I think UConn could have beaten one of the All-Star teams. Yes.
Dortmund, the team that had a really good week and maybe made their case, especially on Saturday, that they belonged to that top 16 was Creighton with that win at DePaul. I'm sorry, with the win at Butler. I was looking to read the next line there. I win at Butler. I'm sorry.
I knew what you meant. Yeah, and Butler needed that game really bad. Butler is right on the cut line. They're just either right when your last few teams in or one of the first teams out. So Butler was fully focused and needed it. And Creighton, after about midway in the first half, never looked back. Shireman and just too much offensive power, and Butler couldn't keep up with them. And that's been the story for a lot of opponents of Creighton. They're just really, really strong offensively. They run great sets under McDermott, and they got some great shooters who can knock down big threes. So I think Connecticut's as good as anyone. They could win the whole thing. I still believe Marquette and Creighton, though, are Final Four good.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Griggs, the other story in the Big East was St. John's. After a tough road loss at Providence, they went out and were absolutely dismantling Seton Hall in the first half Sunday.
Yeah.
Did not play the second half at all. Lost the game at home.
Yeah,
and Patino had some comments afterwards.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Interestingly enough, I thought it was the perfect microcosm for both teams. St. John's looking really good early, Seton Hall not so much, and then Seton Hall looking really good late, and St. John's looking terrible. Patino did not enjoy himself. He called, what did he say, that this has been the most
worst
unenjoyable
experience?
year of his career, or whatever the quote was. What was it, David?
This is the most unenjoyable experience of my lifetime.
He also attacked his own facilities and everything too. It was a
he went
speech. You gotta check it out.
Yeah, it was great.
So long story short, Seton Hall has driven 2 teams and their fan base is completely crazy within the span of a week with 2 dominant halves.
A few interesting games this week here that I've highlighted. UConn at Creighton tomorrow night's a huge one.
Yes, please.
Butler, a pair of road games at Villanova and at Seton Hall. They really need a couple of those. And Villanova's at UConn also on Saturday. And I bring that Villanova up because, Griggs, I don't know that Villanova is that far off the pace at the moment.
They're not. I think Butler is kind of digressing. Less than a week ago, I made a really strong case for them, and I think they lost both their games at home this week. I think they win that game. I think they win at Georgetown. Like, they're not. And when you look at UConn, they're not going to win that one. But if you look at the last 3, if they can win 3 of their last 4, including the Georgetown game, so I guess 2 of the last 3, yeah, I think they're right there.
Well, Tytel, you're the expert on this. You think Villanova has a decent path here?
So let's take a little dive in. I'll give them the win over Georgetown. I'll give them the loss at UConn, which leaves that gives them 15-12 with 4 other games. I don't think they can beat Creighton even at home. So if they win the other 3, that gets them to 18-13. They're going to
Does
have
a
to do
win
some
in the
damage in the
conference
Big East.
tournament get them there?
They're going to need to do some damage in the conference tourney, Chet. I don't see 18-13 regular season getting it done.
Okay, but if they can get one of those UConn or Creighton games that's left on the schedule, that may
Completely
change.
different story. Call me
Yes.
when it happens.
Okay, all right. We'll talk next Monday about Villanova at UConn.
I think the real question is, what does Providence do? Because Wednesday they're going to be going into an angry house facing an angry team. But if Providence wants to make the tournament, they're going to have to beat an angry team on the road.
Yeah. And
Mountain West
Providence Xavier, always awesome. Always.
Mountain West Conference, Griggs, where San Diego State made that top 16 for the
They
committee,
did.
as we mentioned. They had a nice week also with a pair of wins over Colorado State and New Mexico, albeit I know you don't think they counted because they were both at home.
Yeah, they were both at home, so they don't count. But still a nice week anyway. And you know, if you pull up their profile, I think it was kind of telling that the committee did select them. I know that we hadn't, but I think we had them at 17th. And I is this just one of those things that if while you're not getting Benjamins, you might not have $100 bills on your profile. If you have enough 10s and 20s and 50s, you can amass your fortune and move up. And look at what they've done in the top 2 quads. And when you look at their losses, to me, it says that they're really paying attention. BYU, New Mexico, Colorado State, all very strong at home. I don't know what the combined record is, but I'd be willing to bet that the winning percentage is well upwards of 90 in those 3 together. So why punish them for that?
And when you look at it, every loss has been to a team that should be in the tournament.
Yeah.
Yep. I think it was also, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I think it was also the committee showing the Mountain West, telling the Mountain West and the rest of the country, we're paying attention. We like the conference and we're high on you, not just San Diego State, but I think it says a lot for the entire conference.
I'll ask you, Tytel, did the fact that San Diego State made the top 16 make you believe that we really could be looking at a 6-bid Mountain West this year?
Says the guy who said it was a 1-bid league in the preseason podcast. One of my worst predictions ever. Yes.
Hey, I have Miami in the Final Four in the preseason podcast.
It's a very valid argument that I think is going to happen. The big X factor actually does not involve any of the 6th, but they're either the 7th team there, the Run Rebels.
Yeah.
Because remind me where the conference tournament is going to be played next month, Chad.
In the same location where UNLV lost a home game to Nevada on Saturday, so they're definitely beatable there.
Touche.
Home of the immortal ConExpo ConAGG Mountain West tournament.
Yes.
But they've stepped up. I agree with Tytel. They've stepped up and won some games. UNLV really didn't have any business winning. Yeah. So again, on their home floor with the conference tournament on the line, I think they're a form. No one will want to play them. Let's say that. Yeah. They're beatable, but you don't want to play them.
A couple of notable games this week. San Diego State's at Utah State tomorrow night. Colorado State, New Mexico Wednesday, and Colorado State gets the practice game at Vegas on Saturday. Also, you want to get that practice game out of the way so you can win. But one of the Boise State is going to be hosting San Jose State and at Wyoming. We didn't actually mention them, Grace. We probably haven't mentioned them for a few weeks now. But this team also, I think they're solidly there. But they've started to pile up the losses. Also,
yeah, they have. And again, like every game kind of has a pivotal feel. They can't. Of course, they cannot afford to lose at home to San Jose State. I don't think they will. This Wyoming Air Force trip, and if you watch the Mountain West, which I know we all do, that's not an easy trip. A lot of people get tripped up in one or both of those games, even though Wyoming and AFA, neither one of them anywhere near the bubble. That is still a trip that a lot of teams struggle with. They either struggle to win the games, they're a lot closer or a lot more competitive than what they think, or they end up losing one of them. So don't be surprised if they drop one of those.
Mm-hmm. Especially because the Wyoming Air Force game is
the Front Range.
Well, they play both Front Range teams. I'm sorry,
yeah,
Boise State, but they play both. Wyoming and Air Force are Front Range teams. Yes. Let's jump over to the West Coast Conference, where let's start by congratulating the St. Mary's Gales They are the lone remaining team that is undefeated within their conference in the entire nation. How's that one for you?
Good. Yeah.
That is, ooh, did I lose the screen there?
No, it's still up.
Okay. That was the good news for St. Mary's. The bad news for St. Mary's is Josh Jefferson, averaging 10.2 points a game, is out with an injury and could be out for a couple weeks at least here. So a little bad news on the injury front today for the Gales. But Dorman, this team does just continue to roll. 13 in a row now.
They do, and I'm super surprised because I was so high on this team coming into the season, and I thought they would be. I thought they were going to actually finally top Gonzaga and take the conference, but then their non-conference, they looked terrible and they weren't playing good ball, and I couldn't believe what was going on. Then all of a sudden they get in conference and they get red hot, and the team's playing much better together. Coach Randy Bennett doing another phenomenal job. Like you said, Chad, they're just rolling through this conference. San Francisco, to me, is probably the third best team in this conference in the West Coast. So here they come. Their next, they get them at home this week, but that should be a fantastic game. But I look for St. Mary's to keep this rolling and beat San Fran tomorrow night.
Yeah, Gonzaga is going to be at Portland, then hosting Santa Clara. I agree with you. I think the San Francisco St. Mary's game may be the most best game of the conference this week, and I don't know that any of these four games involving these top two teams is going to be that good of a game.
It should be, but God, you love those Bay Area rivalry games. That one's going to be fun tomorrow.
The one thing that should happen is Gonzaga should move into clear second place by the end of this week with the San Francisco loss at home to St. Mary's. So maybe St. Mary's wants to lose the game to keep the Zags down possibly the 3 seed instead of the 2 seed. No.
I think St. Mary's will lock in the top seed if they do beat San Fran tomorrow.
They're going to go real close.
For those of you that have been following us a really long time, Chad Sherwood channeling his fake Joe Lenardi logic.
West Conference, real quick, the A10. Where Stalika, we saw Dayton get by Duquesne and get by a game Fordham team, but did have a 2-0 week this week.
That's the good news for the conference. However, the bad news, if they were looking for a 2-bid A10 team, Richmond did not do their part, losing at home to an angry Franks team by 10 points. So that now puts them in a 3-way tie, at least as far as a loss column, because Loyola has quietly crept back into a first-place tie thanks to wins against St. Joe's and Rhode Island on the road.
Titel, what about the Bonnies? We haven't talked to them since, I think, the preseason podcast where we were picking one bid Mountain West and those types of things.
Thank you. Struggled all season. Home losses to Canisius and Fordham, swept by Duquesne. That being said, they can be competitive with anybody. They beat Akron and Cleveland. They had a 7-point lead on the road at Dayton earlier this month before losing by only 5. Currently tied with UMass for the 5 seed. They've already beaten the Minutemen at home 2 weeks ago. If they can get the sweep on Saturday, legitimate shot of winning out, 12-6 in league play, probably good enough to get a 4 seed. They face a VCU team in the quarterfinals, so they already swept in January. Then they just got to hope their fans can make the in-state trip to Brooklyn for the semifinal rematch with the Flyers. Chad, isn't there some Dayton song the puppet loves? I forget.
No. There is. You don't need to. No. Oh. The fact that someone recorded this and thought, yeah, this sounds great. People will love this. It's amazing to me.
Dayton's games this week, real quick. Only one game in the next 7 days. They are at George Mason on Wednesday night. They better win that game.
Yeah.
Well, I think George Mason actually has the bigger week because they not only play the Flyers at home, they also go to Loyola on Saturday. So one way or another, the Patriots are going to have a say as far as who's going to be in first place in the conference.
I guess we also should give a real quick shout out to George Washington, given that today is President's Day. I'm a little disappointed. It happened about 10, 12 years ago. ESPN set up on President's Day George Washington versus James Madison. It was one of the great games of all time.
Yeah, well, they did it several years in a row.
It was a great event. They really need to bring that back. Would have been a great game today. But anyhow, on that note, let's go to final thoughts. And since I have the screen share up, Titel, I'm going to start with you. I know you have some thoughts about your Arizona Wildcats, and I got you two pictures for you here.
Oh, I love it. So you have to remember, we go back to last winter, 2 of the most painful losses of my life. When Desmond Cambridge hit the 60-footer for ASU's 1-point upset at McHale. And then the following month, Princeton overcoming a 12-point deficit with 12 minutes left in the 4-point upset in the NCAA tournament. Good news, this season has been mostly up. Beat Duke, beat Michigan State, Wisconsin, Alabama. Since they gave up 100 points at Stanford on New Year's Eve, 10-2 with just a pair of 3-point road losses. That being said, ASU got out to a 2015 lead in the rivalry game last Saturday. I was nervous, but it was all uphill from there. We outscored the Sun Devils 90-40 in the final 32 minutes to win 105-60. These schools have faced each other 246 times over the past 111 years, the largest margin of victory in this series, which is why I remain wild about my Cats.
And I just love the Sun Devils tweet after the end of the game. ASU falls on the road to Arizona, back at home to face Washington February 22nd. That's it. That's it.
Oh, nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here. Move along. All right, let's pull this down here. Dorman, any final thoughts?
Yeah, we touched on it a little earlier. Rick Pitino. I read this is the most unenjoyable experience of my lifetime. I think your family and your wife, who stayed and been behind you and loyal and supportive, would probably disagree with that. You're calling out your players individually. I didn't want them, but that's what the portal gave me, and they can't play defense without fouling. And then he's bringing up his practice facilities aren't up to snuff. Like, everything was again, like, this game has been so good to Rick Pitino. I'm not saying he hasn't given back, but like, coach, let's understand these kids are working, most of them, their butts off. They're going to school. They're playing college basketball. They're doing everything they can for you. Like, to call them out one by one and individually after a tough loss, I just don't agree with. I think there's much more important things in life than the most unenjoyable experience of your life. And I just don't like to see it. And I'm the first one to be on these coaches. I love most of these coaches. I think most of them do great for the kids and the schools and the communities. But this one really bothered me, and Pitino crossed the line.
Yeah, you know what? If your team's struggling and you don't have the right players, you don't have the right mix, and you're the head coach, you know where the
Your
first place you
fault.
gotta look in the mirror before you look at anybody else.
Yeah,
Stalika.
absolutely.
Let's go ahead and pull back the top 16 from Saturday, because there was something else that we learned from the selection committee back then. If you look at the West region versus the, I believe it was the Midwest region where Purdue was placed, there was actually,
I'm working on it.
yeah, we
There it
have
is.
it up here right now. You may have noticed that the Midwest region is going to be a bit more stacked than the West region, not so much. There's actually a difference of, 6 points right here if you want to look. 12, 24. Yeah, 37 in the West and 31 in the Midwest right here. Typically, when we're doing brackets by ourselves, we try not to have more than a difference of 5, but I guess because of all the bracketing nightmares that we saw here, the committee probably just said, screw it, we're just going to go ahead with what we have here, even if it does mean two more unbalanced regions compared to what we've seen in years past.
Yeah, when you add those numbers up, 1, 6, 10, and 14 in the Midwest, 4, 8, 12, and 13 in the West, the highest and the lowest should not have a difference of more than 5. But it is to the best of their ability. I've done a few brackets this year where, because of the fact that you've got 4 Big 12 teams in there, 3 or 4 SEC teams in there, it's very hard to pull it off this year. And so that is a rule they can relax, and obviously they did. Greg, do you want to finish the show out?
Yeah, I just kind of want to get back to one of the bigger stories of the season, and there's a few, but I just think that South Florida coming on has been a lot of fun. It's fun to see so much energy around a program that, with maybe very seldom occasions in the past, has not really seen it. Them and Wazoo, another big story, although like people on the East Coast might not stay up late enough to see it, but it's just fun to see. For me, one of the things I always enjoy this time of year and really throughout the whole season is teams that typically aren't in the spotlight finally getting in the spotlight. And I really hope South Florida finds a way to make the NCAA tournament. It'll probably have to be via the automatic bid, because even if they just get there, what a great story that would be.
It's a shame our colleague Zach isn't here. He is the one who had the vision on the South Florida Unstoppables 12 years ago when they
Yeah.
last made the NCAA tournament.
And
He's the
they
one
they
that's really enjoying this run.
The mighty Stan Heath team.
they,
Yes.
they won a game. They got they got to the round of 32. I know that.
Yes.
I think
Yes,
they
they
came out in the
did.
first four,
The
yeah.
actual, I believe they won in the first four. I believe they got two wins.
They
actually.
did, yeah.
The first four into first round game. But
Yeah.
on that note, I do want to thank everybody for joining us. On behalf of David Griggs and David Dorman up here, John Titel and John Sleeka below, I'm Chad Sherwood. Back again Wednesday with Under the Radar, Thursday with the Bracket Rundown. Talk to you again real soon.